Thank you, right.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck. No.
2 in the box!
Ready to go.
We be fast and
They be slow.
wow!
A second Super Saiyan? Second in order, perhaps, but by no means in stature. Your fight is with me now.
I'll have my revenge, and Deathstalker too.
Man, I can't fucking believe this. Another basement, another elevator. How can the same shit happen to the same guy twice?
Oh, please, please. By definition alone, they're inferior films.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Inside the Sequel. You know what this is. This is the podcast where we talk about sequel movies that do not get enough love or attention that they deserve, and we bring them to light and recommend them. Welcome to the new year of 2023, and I am so excited for what this year holds for the podcast. I figured we start off in a very unconventional manner today in our first episode for this new year. If you're new, I would definitely recommend checking out our previous episodes in the last year. I want to thank all the guests that I did have in the last year. Stephen Cognetti. I want to thank Roman Chimeni and Tyler Jensen and all my amazing guests as well, including Dana from Cobwebs, Lindsay Wilkins from Schlock and All. I also want to thank Matt Bledsoe from the Film Feast, because God, he filled my belly full of great episodes. And he guests on the podcast too. Love you, Matt. And so today we have a guest who's not made his return since our Turtles 2 episode. I have the very famous and very almost infamous, I should say, guest. I think he came around this time last year as well. You can check out his channel on YouTube today, where he talks about Blu-rays, Criterion films, and all that great stuff. I have Nathan Jones. Nathan, how are you?
Doing good. I thought I was going to be here for Garfield 2, Tale of Two Kitties, but instead we're here for a very unconventional thing going on here. I was actually very, very surprised by when you were like, "Hey, let's do a 30 for 30." I'm like, "What?"
Yes, so, the Tales of Two Kitty meme still lives on.
Maybe one day.
One day when I have the courage. I'll probably have that episode with you, and I'll probably have Doug McCambridge on as well from Good Times, Great Movies as well. It just seems like the Garfield's right up his alley. I don't know. Kind of looks like him a little bit too. Anyway, sure. Yeah. And so, yeah, Nathan's correct. So today's episode, we are doing a 30 for 30. For those who do not know what 30 for 30 is, it is an ESPN Films label. They put out sports documentaries centered around specific sporting events or people, and kind of chronicalizes the event or that person in the sports history. And they've done great episodes, such as things about O.J. Simpson. They've done episodes on Detroit basketball in the 80s and 90s. They did the very famous Last Dance on Netflix about Michael Jordan. I figured, because in the spirit of, I guess, football season, I was kind of itching. We just are right off the college bowl game that just finished up. I figured we would do a college football documentary to justify it on Inside the Sequel. We did it on a season 2 episode on ESPN's 30 for 30 series. I think we're up to 4 now with 30 for 30. And today we are talking about the title film, Brian and the Boz.
God, I get asked this question all the time. Who is the Boz?
The Boz is highly controversial, highly sensational.
I never met an athlete who could market himself better.
I'm an extremist. People either hate me or love me.
He built himself up to be bigger than life action hero.
A lot of people do that now. He just did it better.
Everywhere you go, all you hear is Brian Bosworth.
He's one of the best college linebackers I've ever seen play the game.
You know who it is. The Boz.
But arguably, he's one of the biggest jerks that's ever played the game.
I told him not to do anything to take away from our player performance on the football field.
If you tell me that I can't do something, by God, I'm going to want to do it.
Which is about the linebacker Brian Bosworth. Also, it fits with this episode. because it's a film podcast we're on. Brian Bosworth did the famous 80s film Stone Cold, not The Wrestler, but an 80s action film with Lance Henriksen. So we figured this was a great way to justify talking about a sports documentary that's tied into film in some ways. Nathan, what are your thoughts on Stone Cold? Not the movie, but The Wrestler.
The Wrestler. So I'm a big fan of Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm a known Rock hater. Actually, I've disliked this guy since the late '90s, and it's all because of Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know, he's the rattlesnake. He's always asking himself, I want one beer, I want two beers, a margarita, and he just keeps going and further into the craziest of realms. He's the Texas rattlesnake for a reason.
And then you hear, oh my God, that son of a bitch.
Oh God.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you got, speaking of Ohio, we got, I mean, we're going to talk about him later, but no, for sure. I love Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I love that you brought up Stone Cold the film, because I've actually never seen this movie. Have you?
I've seen parts of Stone Cold. I know it's a pretty entertaining watch from what I've seen. It kind of gives it, the opening at least. He's in a biker gang, Brian Bosworth, or the Boz, and he's in a biker gang. It kind of feels like Cobra in a weird way, mixed in with, like, I don't know, Action Jackson possibly. It just like Commando is what I've always got. I never finished the film, but I know he's in a biker gang, and I think he's trying to get out of like this jail sentence. I feel very illegitimate on this podcast now because I haven't seen Stone Cold, but I have seen a lot of college football, so I do know a thing or two about Brian Bosworth.
Yeah, speaking of college football, Gore Horned Frogs, right?
Nah, I'm kind of jealous of how invested people are in football, especially college football. It's a phenomenon that I've never understood. Like, so many people support this one university's football team, and most of the fans are more than likely never attended that school or have no relation to that school. Professional sports, I understand. You can like a team because of a player, you can like a team because of a history, or because of, geographic location. But at the same time, with college, it's a little different. Like, why would I root for a team in Texas, like, Texas Christian University or Georgia Bulldogs, when I live in Chicago?
Right. Yeah. I feel like a lot of it has to do with, like, going there, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, I feel like that's the biggest difference between, like, a sport, like a professional sports team, like in the realm outside of college, is it just seems like they can be the only draw I can see really with, friends or families who have been to those colleges and whatnot and have been to those games. But, like, I mean, it's weird though. Like, I mean, I come from Missouri, so Southwest Missouri, and I have some allegiances to some of the colleges stuff that I was around, but at the same time, it's like it's not a strong love. I like my Indiana Pacers, even though I'm not even close to Indiana. I like my Oakland A's, even though I'm not even close to California. So, like, I don't know, it's weird. It's a different switch.
Yeah. Before we get more into Brian and the Boz documentary, I just want to talk, check in on you, man. Like, how are things on the Nathan B. Jones podcast? Are you consuming enough films? Or is it, the channel seems to have grown? I see you doing a lot of collaborations in this past year, which I think were awesome. I loved the intro music. You kind of out Cohen Elliot Cohen in a way. It's awesome.
Well, Elliot's a good friend, so if he's listening, regardless, no, it's been a good 2022 was good. Kind of near the tail end of it, I needed to take a little bit of a break just because I just felt like just a lot of stuff was going on in the world, and then also just personal life, and I mean, just switching vocations and whatnot, and my energy was just all over the place. But, like, overall, like, 2022 was really great because I was able to talk to a lot of really good people, all these different content creators, and then just friends of the show and people who like watch our content and like listen, like, which is just still weird to me that people do that. And then, yeah, so I've been doing that and just been focusing on trying to watch as many films as I can, but at the same time, like, spend the time watching them and not just like checking them off a list. Like, that's another big priority of mine now.
Yeah, your channel's, I feel like in YouTube, in the comments I see, it feels like there's a lot of underground water cooler talk with your channel. It feels like there's a lot of great conversations and engagement in your comment sections and on social media. I don't know if you've done anything different in the past year, but it seems like when you went to England and you did that England, video, I felt like things kind of changed. I saw you do a lot more collaborations. The film journeys kind of, started kicking up a lot more, kind of bringing what I liked about your film journeys series that's been going on is, at first you start off very strong, hard and heavy, you came up hot and heavy. And then you kind of got some day ones in there eventually, like me. And then now you're bringing in, I feel like, a lot of relatively unknown or up and coming startup YouTube channels. Like you did 20th and 20th and 21st centuries, YouTube channel. You brought that on. You collab with a couple other people. And it's just like, I've kind of been introduced that way to new channels and new, personalities that I didn't know were there. I mean, in the algorithm of YouTube. Right. So I feel like with my algorithm, it's basically anything from Family Guy spliced, clips to freaking meme culture, TikTok challenge things.
I mean, that's how I get people to follow you, is like, hey, you like TikTok? Go follow Chris, man. Like, he's got a TikTok channel. I don't even know what I don't know what a TikTok is, even though I was in China when it was around. And so don't ask me what that means. So I can't help you there. But yeah, no, it's been a good year. Also, like, I know that you haven't probably decided to hear this, but I also have a podcast with my old roommate that I started over the last like 3-4 months, and we talk about metal. So if anyone is interested in that genre of music, Scouring the Depths is the podcast, and we've been doing it weekly. We've been putting out podcast episodes, and so that's been a lot of fun, just talking about music, which is something I don't really get to talk about too often. But yeah, so if you like film and film discussion, like, watch the channel, specifically Blu-rays with Nathan Jones. And then if you like, music and metal in particular, and the different subgenres of it, Scouring the Depths is the podcast.
So, okay, that's awesome. Is there are there a few metal bands where you're just not touching at all, where you're just like, we're not talking about new metal, or we're not talking about, Metallica, like,
yeah, no,
because I'm kind of a metalhead myself, like Slipknot's
Slipknot, Rob Zombie, those are your boys. No, I mean, we're gonna be pretty open about it. My roommate and I are really similar tastes, so we definitely may not like some genres and some bands, but we're still going to probably talk about them. That's the thing about the podcast, is we're talking about so many different things on it. We have like themes, like this month right now, we're focusing more on talking about our favorite albums of 2022. And so we're going through our lists and going through our top 20. And then like the month after that, we're going to talk about post metal, which is like a really great subgenre that I adore and can't wait to talk about. So
that's awesome, man. That's really cool. I'm excited to hear all that stuff. I'll definitely be plugging that. Your voice is like butter to my ears, so I'm definitely excited to check that out. But that's great. So Nathan, when I asked you to be on the 30 for be on this episode, and I wanted to do a 30 for 30. I feel like like a lot of people who I feel like this 30 for 30 included people who weren't even remotely interested in sports, was the Netflix exclusive. I felt like it was a Netflix exclusive almost in a way. The Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary.
Oh yeah.
I binged that thing twice last year. So, and I know the story. I've known the story for a long time. But the way it was, broken down to a series instead of just one, like, documentary film, I thought was a smart take on it. But then also it got me thinking about sports documentaries. And I feel like sports films and sports documentaries come hand in hand. Obviously, with the Criterion Collection, you have Hoop Dreams, which to me is one of the best documentary films about sports, period. And ESPN's 30 for 30 has a lot of similar hard-hitting documentaries like that. And then you get some ones about relatively unknown, or, I forgot about that moment kind of, experiences. So that's why I think 30 for 30, I feel like is a very open kind of spectrum for film fans. I feel like, especially with you, I know personally that, you and I talk about sports just as much as we talk about movies now. And I feel like, maybe if you're not a fan of sports, you can still be a fan of sports films and you can appreciate sports documentaries. Was that the case for you? Did you watch things like, Draft Day, and things like that in films, or like, Bad News Bears maybe, or Major League, and go like, yeah, like I don't like to watch the sport, but I like watching the movies maybe. Or was there 30 for 30 documentaries that you gravitated to where you're like, let me do some research on this?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because for most of my life, especially my, I would say teenage to young adult life, I've always kind of been anti-sport. I've never been a fan of sports. Now, when I was younger, I played sports, right? Like a lot of us did. Like we played soccer, I played basketball, I played baseball, I did taekwondo, things like that. But it's not something that would stick with me, and not something I really loved. Like I may have liked in the moment, but I didn't really fall in love with it until really, oddly enough, you mentioned it, but The Last Dance, when COVID hit and that happened at the same time, weirdly enough, it all clicked with me. Now, before I get into that, obviously I had watched things like Moneyball, and I had seen things like Hoosiers and those classic movies like Mighty Ducks and things like that. And I've always been a fan of those things. Like, even if I'm not into the sport, but I really like this story. It's a good story. But yeah, like I said, Last Dance kind of just came out of nowhere for me. And it just brought back all these memories from 1998. And it just made me think about that time of my life where I was I actually kind of did enjoy basketball. I didn't really know very much about it, but it kind of gave me a new appreciation for it. And then it made me want to watch the NBA. And so now I'm a Pacers fan, and I have been for only a few years, I guess now, which is crazy to me to think. But when I get into something, I get into something very passionately. So, and I'm sure a lot of my friends who know me are what? How did you get into this? And then I'm and why Pacers? They always ask me, you just picked a random team. It's yeah, it's pretty much how it happened. I just started watching random games, and then all that happened. But yeah, my sports journey is just a weird one because it all started with being a kid in youth camp and all those things, and then eventually getting into movies that I would watch that have sports related to it, and then eventually to the documentary, and then now I'm I watch all the 30 for 30s I can get, and I get as many of those stories as I can get, even if I'm it's about NASCAR, or it's about Formula One, or it's about Tanya Harding. It's these are things I'm not super interested in the thing they're gonna do in sports. I'm not gonna follow those sports, but I'm following this story, and it's really interesting, and there's a lot of humanity behind it. And now that's I think that's the connection I brought, is these are humans that are really gifted, or who really put their bodies on the line for things, and they're there to showcase how amazing the human spirit is. So that's what really kind of drives me to why I watch these things. So
yeah,
not to mention we also, both of us, grew up watching wrestling too. So
yeah, I'm waiting for a 30 for 30 on the WWE now that Saudi Arabia bought them out. Zing.
We'll see. Vince is out of the cage, I heard. So
yeah, out of the cage. It's yeah. Nathan and I share an affinity, same as Anthony Buziak, aka Boozy of the Terror Table, big wrestling fan as well. So yeah, I'd love to do an episode. I'll probably do an Inside the Sequel episode on WrestleMania 25, if anything. That's a sequel, WrestleMania right there, and that's an iconic one. So look up for that episode one day. But yeah, you said it very well. Even if you're not a sports fan, you get into the drama and the story. And honestly, at the bottom, and the bottom line is, speaking of Stone Cold, that sports documentaries is a part of history, and we get things like historical dramas. We get history documentaries. Peter Jackson did "They Shall Not Grow Old." That documentary got a lot of buzz and great positive feedback, even from people who don't even like documentaries. And I feel like it's a very accessible way. And I think to learn about these events, whether you're invested in that sport, that team, or that person or not, it's just it's a human story, like you said. It's about these gifted people. Now, the great thing about 30 for 30 is the direction style. A lot of the time, these directors who do these documentaries, they're not well known. A lot of times, it seems like ESPN has like the MCU effect of casting unknown directors to do these projects that do really well. You know what I mean? So, they actually sit down and interview people who haven't seen each other for 25 plus years, and we're witnessing it on a documentary film. And the way they splice the current day with the and the past and try to get an understanding of that. I feel like anybody can grasp what the event is going on. 30 for 30 has been around for a very long time. I think even since I was in high school, and I'm 26 now, so it's been around for a while. So I really encourage people to check out ESPN's 30 for 30s and find maybe an event or a sport that you're remotely interested in and give it a chance. I feel like you might find something there. Do you remember the first 30 for 30, Nathan, that you kind of stumbled upon, or was it something you actively you sought out that you wanted to watch, or was it just something that you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to watch Last Dance, and then it was just, all downhill from there?
Well, it's probably more of the latter part. It was probably more of the Last Dance and all downhill. But I do feel before that even happened, there were like sprinkles of 30 for 30s that I had been exposed to. Maybe I don't remember like consciously watching. I do remember OJ Made in America being a thing right before the Last Dance. And being talked about a lot. And that was kind of a breakthrough thing. And it's a fantastic documentary. But yeah, no, I don't know. It definitely feels like The Last Dance was the catalyst and like in general, but I do feel like there's ones that have stood out because I am a basketball fan per se. So, I mean, like just like watching an episode on Duke, and those terrible people,
Mm-hmm.
and watching on the Bad Boys, the Pistons, and like these are ones that like really stick out to me because I'm a big fan of these things. And then, I mean, obviously to get out of 30 for 30 for just like a second, like I know that Netflix has their Untold series, which is like pretty much akin to what 30 for 30 is doing.
Yeah.
And they did a Malice at the Palace episode, which is really special to me because I am like I said, a Pacers fan. So that's a really like a very emotional and very like damning story that happened, and it's a real event that happened. And that's the other thing too, is like I think that's where it really can capture a lot of the interest in this thing, is because it's like, oh, this is just like a crazy thing that happened like in history. It just happens to be in a sports documentary or a sports oriented thing. Like that's the only thing that like is added to it. And I think that's really where like the translation like really hits home. I think for people, if you're interested in watching these kind of things, like that go into it like looking for a story, a human story, and then come out of it being like, I'd be a little bit interested in that sport. Maybe you're not, that's fine, but hopefully you watch a good documentary.
Yeah, I recommend, like, even if you're not a sports fan, to watch sports documentaries, because I feel like those are more enjoyable. Now, if you start watching the sport after you get invested in it, that's cool too. But once you start gambling and doing, overs and unders and gambling and sports betting, then I think sports is not for you and you need to get out of that. I've noticed a trend lately in sports. I know this is completely off topic, but I have noticed a trend in sports lately. Sports bets are going through the roof. You get like DraftKings and all this other stupid shit, where people are like making sports bets all the time. And it's like, I feel like that's a part of the reason I'm not as invested in sports anymore, is because people are just like, oh, I'm watching the game. I'm like, oh, great. Are you a fan of the team or something? And they're like, no, I have the over on this game. I was like, first of all, I don't gamble, so I don't know what the fuck that means.
Yeah, I don't gamble, so
yeah, but I feel like that's part of the reason sports, I feel
Well-
like, has kind of blown up even more now in social media, things like TikTok and stuff, where people are, giving advice on how to properly sports gamble, fantasy, the success of fantasy football, in general, and then, it's January. We're going to have March Madness in 2 months, which for some people, that's basically their sporting event for the year.
One of mine. I'm excited.
Right. Yeah, right. Even though I haven't watched any college basketball at all this year, and I'm excited for March Madness. It's just crazy how sports kind of infuses itself in culture and in everybody's everyday life in some way or another.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing, is like, and that's like what we're going to get to today with when we're talking about Brian and the Boss. It's a moment in history that happened, and it opened up the doors for a lot of things that were going to happen in the future, because this was like so Brian, he was a character, and it eventually, kind of the actions and his look and his style kind of kicks into what we're dealing with, what you're kind of talking about right now, actually, with the social media influence, your own image. Like a lot of athletes just have like their own likeness that they're able to, manage themselves because of social media. Whereas like when this story happened, it was in the 80s, and this also like was a time where like there were a lot of strict guidelines, and there was consequences for actions. And so like that's kind of what we're going to get to today.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and go into the episode, the film we're talking about today, which is the 30 for 30 film, Brian and the Boz. So the film starts off with Brian Bosworth. Brian Bosworth was a football player. He played linebacker in college for the Oklahoma Sooners, University of Oklahoma. Granted, he's from Texas. So first off, that's a big deal. In terms of geographic rivalry. I've always thought Oklahoma versus Texas is like, who's the more country, like who wears the taller 10-gallon hat, I guess, who's the bigger cowboy. But yeah, that's part of the drama there. The second thing was he was a very controversial college sports athlete in the way he marketed himself. And the third thing, at the core of this documentary, to me, and why I've watched this one 3 times now, what I love about it is it really, what's the word I'm thinking of? It really dissects masculinity, positive masculinity.
Absolutely.
It really talks about, accepting and having humility for past mistakes and forgiving and acceptance. And also a lot to do with, social and parental pressure. With sport that comes with sports. I mean, I feel like a lot of people who go into sports feel some sort of pressure. I feel like there are parents. I mean, isn't that the big trope in kids' sports, that parents are yelling at their kids and the refs at a little league basketball game, and living through their kids in some way? I feel like this documentary kind of puts the stamp on an emphasis on these issues as well. So I really like this documentary. I think it covers a lot of interesting things. And I love the opening where it starts with Brian Bosworth driving with his son to a storage unit which Brian Bosworth hasn't been into, where his, currently deceased father had owned, and he has to go through it and clear things out with his son. And it's kind of going through memory lane. I think that's a terrific opening. It sets the stage on what's going on. And I love how it goes back and forth between the past and the present of going through this storage unit with his son.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, the opening really, like you kind of highlighted, is a great way to like really kind of get you in like, well, like what, like why is this such a, like why are we doing this right now? Like why aren't we just talking about, like what happened with this guy? Like, right. Like, but like you're saying, the consequences of this guy who has such a personality, obviously it's in the title. That's why they're separated. It's Brian and the Boz, because it's two parts of a single person, and like a personality versus like the human being that exists, and that's really what it's highlighting. It's highlighting those two halves. And yeah, no, I love the way this is started off, and like you're saying, it's going back and forth, and you bring up that generational thing where, like, you have the parents who are on the sidelines yelling at the kids or whatnot. You saw that with Brian happen with his father, who had these huge expectations on his shoulders, and it eventually leads to such a, like you're saying, a very understanding and a very humbling kind of male experience, to where he's talking to his son and he's saying, like, hey, like, you may like this particular thing about me, but this is not something I'm proud of. This is something like that he gets so choked up in so many moments in this entire documentary, which makes it even more like I'm choking up thinking about it.
Yeah.
So,
and it's so crazy because it's like there's this 6'2" guy, 250, like this big guy with his son who's
wrestled with the hawk and animal. So
right. Yeah. Like he's this big guy with his son who's tall and lanky, like complete opposite of what he is. And the dad is the one who's super emotional. And I feel like this documentary tackles a lot of deep rooted issues that aren't on the surface. Like the documentary gets deeper and deeper. It talks about, it interviews Brian personally off the site and in the site. It talks about his, they interview his sister, they interview childhood friends, and they talk about his upbringing and his father. And it's so, the way they talk about it, how it was then, and then realizing, oh crap, like the way my father or his father was talking to him is not okay. And we just dismissed it in the past. Like it was normal for a father to scold their son in public and publicly humiliate him and just never be good enough. Was normalized. No one did anything. And then, ultimately being the bystander pays the price, where Brian becomes this kind of, it makes it seem like it's a sort of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde to include film into this documentary. He doesn't have a split personality disorder. He doesn't. He talks about how he's this big, very talented athlete who was very introverted, who was very low in self-confidence. And what he did to cope with it was create a persona that allowed him to have those things he didn't have. To me, it sounds, like a success story, but it's just, when you watch the documentary more and you see, step by step how his life goes on, it just kind of was like the beginning of the end for him.
Yeah, no, it moving past like the opening crawl, and then, like you're saying, talking about like his childhood friends, talking about how he grew up, and the documentary puts forth like, okay, like how he started off in OU and how he really dominated, and then was really quiet, like you said, and then eventually like a switch kicked in to where it's like, oh, I need to show everyone, like what I'm made of. Like I'm really, like I'm all that, I'm something that needs to be like worshipped in a way. Mm-hmm. And like I want to be different from everything else, and that's where that whole thing, that whole persona started with the Boz. And it is interesting to see that transformation, because even watching this documentary and me watching like the footage of the old times, and then also just thinking about him talking about it now, it does seem like it was a show, like as in like he was still Brian the entire time. And like only when like a camera was put in front of him, like in the olden days, was he like, oh yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say something about the NCAA, or I'm gonna go ahead and have some crazy haircut that is like super against the regulation, or like having like these taped shoes that have messages on them, just to like prove a point, and kind of strike fear into his the rivals that he would be playing against, but also the teams and like just people in general, right? Society, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when Brian Brian gets recruited by famous college coach Spritzer, I believe it was, right? Barry Switzer, sorry. Brian comes in as a freshman in college and he's kind of has the pressure on his shoulders of a whole football program to do well. He succeeds expectations, but he cracks under pressure. Again, his introvertness and like these expectations he can't meet as Brian. So he decides his persona is going to be this character called Boz. So Brian Bosworth is now the Boz, and he rocks a sweet fade mullet. He looks like Iceman, mixed in with Vanilla Ice. He just looks cool. He's a badass. He plays linebacker.
The best mullet I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would have gotten. It's like what Arnold's flat top did for me when I was in my formative years. I remember when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and my dad took me to go get a haircut for my birthday, and my mom said, to my dad, make sure he gets a haircut for his birthday. And my dad takes me to the barbershop and he says, you can get whatever you want. And I tell the lady at the barbershop, can I get the Arnold Schwarzenegger haircut? And she gets me a flat top for my birthday. And my mom's like, to my dad, what the fuck is this? Why did you let him do this? And he goes like, it was his fucking birthday. Like, that's the type of shit I would have been on. If I knew who the Boss was, I probably would have gotten a fucking fade mullet. Like that shit is awesome. And he's wearing these. Yeah, what are those sunglasses he's wearing? Like those like straight up 80s sunglasses.
Straight up like wrestling glasses is what they seem to be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're from Brian the Hitman Hart. I swear to God, they look exactly.
Macho Man's other like.
I'm the Macho Man.
It's a mix between Macho Man and Bret Hart for sure.
Yeah, it would have been awesome if like Brian Bosworth pulled up to a camera after like making a sack and said, "Bonesaw is ready."
Spider-Man reference there for everyone who doesn't know what
there you go. I can't wait to cover Spider-Man 2 on this podcast. But that's not one of the unknown sequels, right? Everyone knows that one.
Right?
Pardon?
You know the boy to pick that one for that one, right?
I might do a Spider-Man 3 just to be that bitch. But no, yeah, Brian Bosworth is a fucking badass in college. I mean, he's rocking this mullet fade. He's got these sweet shades. He's a fucking prick in interviews. Like he tells people like, I don't give a fuck like if you hate me or not. Like he's talking shit about other teams that are very talented. But the thing is, he talks the talk and he walks the fucking walk wearing a fucking cutoff jersey that doesn't fit him. Like he's showing the abs. He's tackling bozos. I mean, yeah, the Boss is fucking badass. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, and he's also insanely smart. That's the one thing about this podcast, about this documentary. That captures well about Brian Bosworth. I feel like in a documentary like this, talking about a character like Brian Bosworth, I think people would be like, oh, he's just like this jock idiot that's super talented and doesn't care about consequences. But when they're interviewing the Boz, he's talking about his process and why he did these things. And you're like, holy shit, this guy knew what the fuck he was doing.
Yeah,
like,
it's
so smart.
I think his emotional intelligence is really high.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the that's the thing I would say is like the reason why it's such a good story to get a hold of, because you can empathize with what he's doing, because you can really tell he's being genuine about what he's talking about. And like that really shows through with the documentary, is like how honest he's being.
But yeah, like it talks about like how much pride he had and how much disdain he had for his family. I feel like also, he goes to Oklahoma, even though he's living in Texas, and everyone and his friends are from Texas as well. He kind of does it like an act of rebellion. It's not the Boz who's doing this, it's Brian. And I feel like that's part of like his whole thing is he's trying to get away from something constantly. What he's getting away with is his father. He's getting away from like, these issues and trying to avoid them. But it seems like trouble constantly was following him when he would do that. Like when he left Oklahoma, he wouldn't go home, but his dad would still come to all the games. When the media was coming to him and he was too introverted and wanting to, avoid the interviews, he became the Boz and would do these interviews that would bite him in the ass. But he still won a national championship. Well, technically he won 2. He didn't play in one of them.
Got kicked out for something.
Yeah, that was kind of BS in my opinion. But we'll go back to the storage unit part is with his son. And it feels like in the beginning of the documentary, his son is just idolizing his dad, and his dad every time is pulling out these remnants from his past that his dad had kept. And the way that Brian talks about his dad is just like a disdain, and just like, why did he care about these stats? Why was he living through me? And he's trying to tell his son, like, don't do that. Like, don't idolize me. Don't think this stuff is super fucking cool. I'm trying to teach you a lesson. Like, be your own person. And that's where the heart of this documentary shines, I feel like.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, like you were kind of alluding to, it's like, he's going through this, these memorabilia that he has of the past self that he was. And it comes across one particular thing that like is crux of like where like he really feels like he fucked up. Like this is the thing where it's like, why did I wear this thing? Why was I trying to get in deeper water? And so and that thing was the NCAA shirt.
That NCAA t-shirt's fucking badass. I mean, I don't know. It's just like some shit. I feel like if you didn't like sports, you would call him a prick. So yeah, Brian Bosworth, because and I still think this was a bullshit thing at the time, but I felt like because he was bigger than college football in his own right, the NCAA was trying to use him as a scapegoat. And that's what the documentary kind of talks about. It's like, hey, he was punished, but overtly severely punished, because he had an injury after they won the national championship, and he went to a doctor, and the doctor had prescribed steroids, and the NCAA had said, he tested positive for steroids, even though they were from his medication from a doctor. But, the accusations were still out, and his coach was not willing to defend him. So, he was suspended for the national championship college football game. The biggest player in the country, he was suspended for it because he wore a t-shirt that said, for the NCAA, it said National Communist Against Athletes on the sidelines.
And then on it says, what does it say?
On the back?
Yeah, no, in the front it said it's like he said something about Russia, right?
No, yeah, I mean, he basically was calling the NCAA, fucking communist and Russians during the 80s. So
which during the 80s, right? So
right, Reagan had a hard on when he probably saw that. But yeah, in a national championship game when all the cameras there, and the documentary kind of interviews his teammates, and his teammates say, yeah, that's fucking stupid. That was selfish of him and stuff like that, to take away from the team and stuff like that. The sports part of it, I don't care too much about, but it's more or less when after they show clips of these things that Brian Bosworth did, it goes to Brian in the present, and he's talking about like, my boss persona had taken over where I didn't care about the consequences. I was too hurt by then, or I was too upset to kind of rationale this thing. So I'm just going to act out. And to me, that's very relatable. It's like, I don't blame the guy. Like, I mean, you see the type of scandals and things that, current athletes get these days. And you think about the system and the institutions and all the things on underneath the surface that are unfair and benefit other people. I'm kind of like with the boss, in 2023. I'm like, yeah, like I would have fucking wore the shirt too. But the NCAA didn't pay college athletes back then, but profited off them. So fuck them, I think the documentary is way ahead of its time in 2013, in a 2023 where college athletes do get paid now. I don't know. Like, where do you stand with that t-shirt? Because it seemed like a small little joke ended up having a huge impactful consequence on him. And that's what the documentary changes for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I would say, like, personally, I'm somebody who kind of likes to stay away from controversial things. Now, like, have you watched my YouTube channel? I mean, obviously we're different in that way. Me getting on this podcast was a mistake. But other than that, no, I mean, the thing is, I don't know. Like, it's just strange to me. I think public reaction, and I also think, like, entity's reaction that like there's a control element when those things come in. That's what really irritates me, is because it's like, this is pretty like inoffensive. You know what I mean? It's a joke. Maybe it's not a good joke. It's just like, but like to like completely like remove him from, the team pretty much, and being like, it's like, you're blacklisted now. Like,
Exactly.
to me, it just seems it's so minuscule. Like I could see it's weird because like thinking about the NBA right now, right? Like I can think of Grayson Allen, talking about him and the amount of things that he's like done to other players, and like he's still doing it this season. And he just gets like, a flagrant foul, or like, like almost ending Caruso's career, who's a player. Like I think he got like 1 game suspension, like, and then like you go back to like the Mouse at the Palace. And then you're like the consequences are like, they're so outweighed, and like they're so crazily different. Now obviously those are different things, where there's athletes. I mean, there's a lot of caveats in there, but like I feel like I don't know. I just think like when you are somebody who is an athlete who is a representative of, an entity of some sort, a team per se, I think that, there should be consequences, but like, I don't think that it should be enough to where it's like, I think it should be internal, and not so much like, hey, you're all done. So I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm just rambling right now, but like,
no, you get a good point. It's like, why is Kyrie Irving and why is LeBron James constantly getting crucified by the media, while someone like Grayson Allen, who's kind of a scrub in the NBA, is making millions of dollars trying to hurt other athletes without repercussions. But like LeBron, puts out a tweet, or like Kyrie Irving puts out a personal opinion when a reporter asks him, they're like, oh, whoa, like those guys are toxic. Those guys are, a cancer to a locker room. What, Grayson Allen's not? Like if Grayson Allen's my teammate, I would be like, what the fuck are you doing out there, dude? And then it goes to me. I think that's what I think Brian and the Boz is kind of going into, is that there was something inherently wrong with the institution. We're talking about the 80s, the mid 80s, the Reaganomics era of the 80s of sports. And he's talking about communism. I think that's a fair argument to be made. Maybe he's the scapegoat for something of a bigger issue at hand, and he's just kind of like, one little domino that had to fall. And it obviously impacted his life, because then after that, he's, like you said, he's blacklisted, like in film during the, McCarthyism and the black listing in Hollywood. Brian Bosworth is kind of left in limbo. He kind of is forced to just go professional into the National Football League, because this college coach would not accept him, which hurts ultimately, because he saw him as a father figure. In the documentary, it's no like, secret. And when he gets into the league, he's like this ultra mega star, which I think is pretty badass. Like, he has all these endorsements and all these pictures of, he looks like the ultimate badass bozo, or Boz, excuse me.
Bozo. Yeah, no, it's but he's still, I mean, like, that's the thing, is like, he's still like hurt from the whole experience. And so like, you can tell he's already far gone past that point. So he was already like, he was turning down contracts and whatnot and then eventually got signed, and then, by that time that happened, I feel like it was already too late. And then, he played a season, and then got hurt, and then like pretty much had to end it, which is just crazy. So, but I have a sneaking suspicion a lot of that, like that physical damage that happened to him, a lot of that had to do with like his emotional stability as well, like his mental health. And I like those all come in tandem. So if you're mentally not having things going well for you, you're probably physically also in the same boat. And so it affects that. So I think that's the reason why his NFL career was so short, is because he already had things going on, his demons that he was fighting.
Interesting. Yeah, because like when he gets into the professionals and he's going into the supplemental draft, to me, when I'm watching that, I feel like it's like Godfather, feels like Goodfellas. You know what, like where Henry is like selling cocaine from his guys in Philadelphia, and Paulie's not supposed to know about it and everything, and like he's driving around town and that helicopter's chasing him, and he's in an emotional distress, and it's a physical distress for him, and he's got to do all this other shit. That's what I feel like, that part of the documentary where he's like, I got these endorsement deals, I got a movie contract, I'm trying to, I'm getting fucking paid and all this other stuff before I even touch the fucking field, and it's like, it kind of feels like that, like this high anxiety fucking cocaine rush to like do all this shit that's like irrelevant to what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what I feel like when I'm watching it. And I know, like you said, when you talk about he was probably emotionally unstable for it and mentally unstable for it. It seems like he admits, like, yeah, he was spinning out of control and no one was there to kind of check up on him. It always felt like his career was almost illegitimate in a way. It felt like it was a career built on like saying controversial or doing controversial things. He's kind of like the pre-Kanye of the NFL.
Ooh,
Zing!
You're still a stan of him, huh? After all this time.
But he made the college dropout, though.
Yeah, well, just because.
No, I can't get canceled on my own podcast. Now, I've had to put Kanye to rest. I haven't played him in at least, months. So
I know he was your top artist of last year, so don't.
Yeah, Mac DeMarco, because I'm a basic bitch. But yeah, like, and then while this is going on, it still cuts away to him conversing with his son, and I love the part where he kind of breaks down when he sees his first NFL contract picture with his dad and his family, and he said, this should have been the happiest moment of my life, but it was actually one of the worst because I was at a terrible place in my life. And he starts crying. Like, it's an emotional moment for him. And his son is there patting him and crying too. And it's like, like, first of all, I'm thinking ESPN, how do you convince this guy to go, to the storage unit for like pain and suffering and going back and revisiting his past? And then like, having him be able to go through all those things. It's just so hard, It's like going through your phone and like, going through your past and like crying because like, like those were bad moments, you're revisiting your past. That's what they're doing with him. Really powerful stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, no. Like that's kind of what highlights this one in particular out of a lot of the 30 for 30s that are out there, is because it definitely, it feels like it comes full circle. I mean, like it leads up to that final shot where it's, him and his son out on the field at an OU game, like, like these people, and he's finally been like, accepted and embraced in OU culture and has been for some time now. Luckily. And it's nice to see people still care about him. And even if it's like, you're like, hey, I was here for not all the right reasons, but like you still care for him, like, and then he comes out to that field and sees all the people like greet him and whatnot, but like he just like looks out there and he's like, you know what, it's like it was still worth playing the game, and at the end of the day, that's something that really shines through, is because he's there with his son. He's there kind of accepting the fact that he went through all that pain. But he's definitely trying to get through it in a way where he's telling his son about, like, it's like, hey, like, you be you and don't let me dictate how you exist.
I love that part. I think it's just an important part of ESPN's 30 for 30s in general. Yes, they're about awesome sports moments, but there's always a heart to them. And that's why I get pissed at every Oscars where there isn't an ESPN 30 for 30 documentary nominated for Best Documentary of the Year.
You heard it here first, folks. We got to get the petition started rolling.
Yeah. If you could do a 30 for 30, what would you do a 30 for 30 sports documentary on?
Well, it's easy for me. I would just talk about the ABA Pacers.
Ooh, that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would talk about it. I mean, that was the most dominant basketball team in that short-lived league that existed, and now we have 4 teams in the NBA that came from that. particular time in basketball history, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like I like basketball documentaries. That's definitely my sport that I'm a fan of. And yeah, it's always exciting to kind of see where things came from and where things lead, especially when it comes to places and times and the different types of people who were there and like what made it such a like a enigmatic place to be. And yeah, a lot of the times I feel like it's super forgotten, these kind of things, because time passes. Yeah, we have, movies, we have documentaries on these things. Like, I mean, like right now I'm looking at the Criterion 100 Years of Olympics box set that I have.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a really cool box set that I've only seen a little bit from. But like, I know that when I do jump into that thing and I jump into it like bit by bit, I know how special that's going to be. And like, I just know for a fact that like, this is history that I'm looking at. And at the end of the day, I know that you and I both have a history background in our education like world, and like that's the things that we're interested in, like just in our everyday kind of things that we're going through. And so yeah, if it's related, if it ties to like a sports documentary or it ties to a movie or something like an epic movie like Troy or something, even if it's not real, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's those things that like really like get me going. It's like wow, so much stuff has happened in the past that we don't know anything about, and we haven't forgot about it, and that's the thing that I care about.
Interesting. If I were to do a 30 for 30, I would do it on the 2006 Chicago Bears road to the Super Bowl. I'm biased because I was a kid and I loved the fucking Bears as a kid growing up. And that was the first time they went to the Super Bowl since 1985. And they played the Indianapolis Colts, Peyton Manning's Colts. And that was Peyton Manning's first Super Bowl win. The Bears lost ultimately. One of the saddest moments of my life, I think. I remember watching that game because the Bears were winning most of that game and then they lost. And I remember looking at my dad and saying, the Bears are about to win a Super Bowl, right, Dad? I've waited my whole life for this. And he's like, it looks like it, Dad. And then they fucking lost. And then my dad had a depression. So, I kind of pivot that moment to being my dad has a depression because of the fucking Bears losing in the Super Bowl. And hence, my disappointment in life because of that.
And that's why you are the way you are now.
There you go. I'm so apathetic because of that fucking, I live in Chicago and it's a breath of fresh air to be back in Chicago, back to where I grew up, because there's such an apathetic attitude and a self-loathing attitude in this city because of our sports teams, and I kind of love it. It's a comfort blanket. Yeah, the Cubs suck. Yeah, I know the Cubs suck, but we love them, the lovable losers, right? Just like us living in Chicago in the fucking gold. The Bears fucking suck. They're idiots, just like us, because we're working our fucking idiot jobs, right? So, yeah, there's a part of the trade of the city that I love.
My take is I like the Blackhawks, which is not a likes team right now.
Yeah, fuck the Hawks.
I mean, like, I don't follow hockey, but like, I mean, it's weird because like like yourself. I mean, I've only been to Chicago, I think 3 or 4 times now in my life. But that is a city I do not forget. It's something that I really, it's my favorite city in the Midwest. It literally is the thing that like I would love to go to and like just spend more time in and be around. And
we got personality.
Yeah, like I just love it. Obviously it's not for everybody, but like, who cares? Like, place is great.
Just admit it, Nathan. You like eating glizzies. Like, just admit it. You like our hot dogs.
Yeah, they're good, but Kuma's Corner. Kuma's Corner.
Kuma's Corner.
You haven't been yet, have you?
No, I don't go out and eat too much. Inflation and all that shit.
Well, when I head up there, we're gonna have to go there, dude, because it's definitely like my go-to every time I'm in Chicago.
Hell yeah, brother! Next time the WWE's in United Center, just come up.
Well, yeah, the double bill with the Chicago Bulls game. Let's do it.
Do you imagine if we like went to go see the WWE at United Center and then like we don't know, but then you just hear the walk off for the main event for Friday Night SmackDown, and you just hear can you smell what The Rock is cooking?
And I'll walk out the door.
Shout out.
You know,
I like how you let me just say we were going to go to a Friday Night SmackDown versus a Monday Night Raw.
yeah, I was gonna say like when you were talking about SmackDown, I was like that's the lesser of the two.
Wow. I grew up on SmackDown. That was the working class show
That's
of the
because
week.
Batista and Rey Mysterio were on SmackDown.
Oh yeah, the Animal Brother.
Dude, Batista is the greatest living. Ryan, hey, dude, you know what? Ryan Johnson, you're right. And I've been saying, and Chris, you can back me up on this. I've been saying this for years. I've been saying Batista is the best wrestling, turned actor.
He is.
I've been saying that for years. And then I just hear it from Ryan Johnson, and I'm just like, finally, somebody said it. Like
he is.
I
watched part of Black Adam, and Batista shows so much more emotion in Glass Onion than like the half of like most of like Black Adam. Like Black Adam in The Rock, there's like no personality.
I don't want to watch that movie, but so I won't.
I watched half of it. But yeah, okay, Nathan, before you get going, I figured a fun little thing to put you on the spot. Give me your top 5 sports films. As we talk about sports documentaries, give me your top 5 sports films. They could be sports films that are fictional, non-fictional. They could be documentary films. Give me your top 5 sports films.
Shoot, this is going to be hard to do. I don't know if I could put them in order per se.
No order, just 5.
I can give you 5. Definitely Moneyball. Moneyball is one of my favorite movies, probably of all time. It's one of the reasons why I like the Oakland A's. Like besides the fact that I grew up being around my dad, who has a bunch of Missouri like sports memorabilia, and the Kansas City A's athletics used to be a thing, and that's where they were before they went to Oakland. So I grew up being around a lot of that stuff. So that's a great film. I really love Everybody Wants Some by Richard Linklater.
Ooh.
That's a college baseball movie, and but it's just so freaking good. And like Linklater, it's such an underrated film. It's not talked about that much, and I think everyone should go watch that movie. I like Hoosiers, of course. Like I said, I'm a big Indiana basketball fan, so of course, that. That's actually that's probably why Indiana's known for basketball. It's not the Pacers. It's actually the Hoosiers is why a lot of people know about, them in particular. The other thing too is obviously, I don't want to say Hoop Dreams, so I won't say Hoop Dreams because that's a documentary.
You could say documentary.
But yeah, I would say Hoop Dreams is up there. It is just an incredible film. And I can't stop thinking about it as much as I why the reason why I watch these things is the reasons I'm seeing those things in the first place. And I would say maybe the last one that really plays kind of a big role in me growing up is probably The Sandlot.
Yeah.
I just talked about 3 freaking baseball movies, 2 basketball movies. I like a lot of other sports movies too, don't worry. But yeah, Sandlot has a lot of special history with me because, the reason I talked about these baseball movies is because my dad is probably the biggest baseball fan I know. He, like myself, has a collecting problem. He's a hoarder actually of baseball memorabilia, and his collection of things dwarfs mine. My collection dwarfs his by times 20. That's how much my dad has. And he's always loved baseball. He's grown up as he used to play college baseball. He grew up with the sport, and it means a lot to me. Even though I don't really follow it as much, but when I go to baseball games, or when I watch The Sandlot, that's so it just brings me back to those days where it's I used to play pickup games with my friends, and then also thinking about my dad. So and so yeah, nope, this one's for him, man. So this episode is for, I would say is for that father-son relationship for me.
Nice. So. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I feel like sports, whether we're a fan of sports now or not, I feel like sports ties into film, which I feel like they're always at butting heads, the film bros versus the sports jocks. I feel like they butt heads, but then we can meet in the middle, because like in my top not my five. Yeah, I'll say my top five in no order. I mean, you get things like Draft Day, which are freaking awesome. I'm going to put Draft Day in there. I'm going to put Spike Lee's He's Got Game in there. I'm going to put Major League 3 because it's inside the sequel and I'm that fucking idiot as a kid. Major League Baseball 3, Back to the Minors. I'm going to throw that in there. I'm going to throw Rocky 3 in there as well.
Oh, I should have picked a boxer movie. Damn.
And then, I'm going to sound basic as fuck for this one. But I'm going to put Surf's Up, the surfing movie. It's tied. Surf's Up, the DreamWorks animated film. It's a tie between that and Blue Crush 2.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Brink.
No, Blue Crush 2 and Surf's Up, both surfing movies. They're tied for 5th, but those are my 5 sports movies. But yeah, I think like even if you're not a fan of the sport, watching sports movies is really entertaining and it's really fun as long as there's like some comedy and there's some drama and possibly some romance. Recipe for a great film. But that's why that's why we talked about Brian and the Boss, because you get that you kind of get some drama, you get some great iconic moments. You get great storytelling, just like any other film. So shout out 30 for 30, shout out those documentary films. I highly recommend watching 30 for 30 in general. If not, Brian and the Boss would be a great one to check out, especially if you're a fan of like, Brian the Boss in Stone Cold or any of his other films. I think like ones like Revolution Road, I believe. Revelation Road and then Revelation Road 2. Shit, there's a sequel. Might have to cover that at some point.
Here we go.
There we go. But yeah, check those out. Other than that though, Nathan, hey, what's going on in your channel, boss? Like, what do you got coming up?
Oh, well, I'm still piecing together like my top 10 films of the year. So I think I might do a video on that soon. I have a big project coming up where I'm going to be doing something cool in my movie room, which you know about, that I'm probably going to be trying to film in bits and pieces. I don't really know how to do time-lapse stuff, but I might do that. And then, I have probably a big collection kind of update because I like to do that every year, which is going to be a pain in my ass because it gets more and more every year, and my arm gets tired when I like talk about these things. But here we are.
You're basically doing what the Flick Pick does every year, where he goes through his entire Blu-ray collection and he puts them all on the floor and then like sorts through them and like says, "Oh yeah, this movie is in my collection."
I don't take them off my shelf. I'm like my camera just goes through my shelf. I'm like, here's the things. I don't know. Like I feel like I want to do something different this year. I don't want it to be insubstantial. You know what I mean? That maybe unsubstantial. That's the word. I don't know. Anyway, something that has some kind of substance to it is what I'm trying to do with it. Not like, here, look at all my shit. I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? I
get that. I think I haven't done my complete Blu-ray collection in a very long time, but if I were to do one today, I'd probably put a ranking in order of films that make me feel more like a virgin and ones that make me feel less like a virgin.
That's a good list. And
started from less to more, because the films get better as the more of a virgin I am.
Ooh, yeah, come and see, man. This one should be titled.
Yeah, I just I can't wait to show everyone that I have Ghost World on Criterion because I'm the biggest virgin there is.
I feel like that's a movie that could get you laid. If you watch it with the right person, I feel like you could.
That leads me into if you want to check out the YouTube channel, we just recently had put out what did we put out recently? Our top 10. I did my top 10 of 2022 video. I did. And then one of the next videos that's going to be coming out is our top 5 recommended first date films.
Ooh.
Yeah. So speaking about getting laid, listen to this top 5 video that's going to be coming out soon. So
preview of Kung Pao. You're the 5th in that list.
You always got to bring up that film. You got to let the world know that I've watched that film more than 3 times.
We've watched it at least 20.
Yeah. We watched it probably more times than The Undertaker has won at WrestleMania.
Jeez.
Oh, geez. Now the snorting starts. But yes, if you like this episode, if you're a fan of sports films or 30 for 30s in general, let us know on Twitter, where you can interact with me and the show at Sequel Pod. On Twitter, you can follow me at Hertastic_Chris. Nathan, where can people check out that wonderful channel that's going to have a chock full of goodies in 2023?
Well, you can follow me on specifically Blu-rays with Nathan Jones. I'm on there on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm not on there as much as it's good that I'm on there, but yeah, I'm sure Chris will have those links too if I don't remember all the names and underscores and all that stuff as social media and stuff. So
Jesus, dude, you're getting old.
Dude, I am about to get my Roth IRA a look at.
There you are. Everyone, I highly recommend checking out Nathan Jones and the Nathan Jones YouTube channel. It's awesome. You'll find something you'll like on there as well. Check out his Film Journeys YouTube channel as well. Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's been good to catch up and talk about sports, which is something I know that a lot of people probably aren't at this stage of the podcast listening to, but it's good to be here. And that we both enjoy that isn't really thought about much. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem at all, man. Thanks for making the time for me. Next time we'll probably talk about something of a little bit more our speed, aka a shitty Disney sequel film.
I'm in no matter what it is, and there probably needs to be more booze next time.
Yeah, Beverly Hills Chihuahua 3. Look out for it.
First.
There you go. But yeah, if you like this episode, I highly recommend checking out our other episodes in 2022. You can find us on YouTube, where we post our episodes on Hertastic Reviews. You can check us on Twitter. Again, the show is at Sequel Pod as well. Email the show at sequelpod@gmail.com. I love reading the fan email and the recommendations. Are really great. Also want to give a quick shout out to Kip Vaughn, who's been always a supporter of the podcast, who's reached out. He's been working on an awesome project as well, called the present can be 2020, where he kind of goes back and revisits things from the past. It talks about things that he really enjoyed. But yeah, check out Kip Vaughn and all his awesome work on Twitter as well. And that's Kip Vaughn, so shout that out. But yeah, my name is Chris at Inside the Sequel. And remember, if you aren't watching 30 for 30 sports documentaries, do you really care about cinema? Other than that,